Many people today in this first next step success that we are organizing. My name is Elena Sánchez, Vega, and I will be chairing this meeting today. But before I start, I would like to say a bit about our association. So we are CNR, Spanish Scientists in the Netherlands. And actually our organization is intended to support Spanish scientists that are performing the work in the Netherlands and also to represent them in front of different organizations and authorities. But also, and I think it's very important, we want also to promote cooperation between our two countries, Spain and the Netherlands, and also to increase the communication in science. So CNR was born exactly 1 year ago, and actually we are very happy. So far we have already 140 members. Just for the people that is not Spanish, you can be also a member if you are not Spanish. We are not limited only to Spanish people, but obviously it's our main target. And we have already organized in this year 3 scientific meetings and many other social events. So we are actually pretty happy. And obviously this would have been not possible without the hard work of many people. Mariëlle, our president, that she really started a lot all this and really bring this to a new level. Carlos Martín, our vice president, Rodrigo García, secretary, Estefania Lozano is taking care about all the matters more related to education, Miriam Guillén in science communication, and Andrea Valles in communication and social media. And today, this is one of our actions. Actually, we build this next step success. The idea is that we will create a series of different workshops and meetings in which we want to give information to the people about national and international grants, and also to give them a bit of granting tips and maybe some advice. And also another goal is also that we can connect people. So we can connect people that is interested to write a grant with the national boards and the different organizations. And also maybe we can also help a bit to find collaborators if you are interested. So our first meeting today, as I say, is about European grants. And for this reason we invite Mariëlle Brouwer. She's one of the national contact points of European grants here in the Netherlands. And she will explain us very in detail how these different grants work and how can we apply and what is the best moment to apply for. But we wanted also to hear a bit from the experience of people that already was in this writing process. So we decided also that next to the experts, we wanted to have also the experience of the people that get some of these grants. So for this reason, we invite Carlos Martín who got a Marie Curie grant, Elena Sánchez who got a co-fund here in the ERC, and then we will have later on Noelle Miranda who got just very recently a starting grant. And with this, I think I stop. I will give the floor to Mariëlle.
Hello, so my name is Mariëlle Brouwer. I work as a national contact point for Marie Curie Actions and also for the ERC at the Netherlands Enterprise Agency. Thanks, first of all, for inviting us here today to talk a bit more about what type of European funds could you apply for if you are a researcher working here in the Netherlands. So I work for the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, which is an agency from our Ministry of Economic Affairs. And in that agency, all the national contact points for Horizon 2020 are based. I am just a national contact point for Marie Curie and ERC actions, but I have a lot of colleagues who are covering all the different elements of the Horizon 2020 program. So if you have any questions about any other type of Horizon 2020 grant, you can always find one of my colleagues to help you with that. We basically help to get as much money out of the European framework program to the Netherlands. So we encourage people to apply for grants within Horizon 2020 in the Netherlands, but we also give people information on how to do that, give them some advice, how do you write a good proposal. We also give workshops, trainings, or also information sessions like today on how does it work. And because we are officially appointed as national contact point, we have access to all the evaluation summary reports from the European Commission as well. So because we have insight in the evaluation reports, we can also do some analysis of the results and see a bit like what goes wrong, what works in proposals. So that makes us maybe a bit different from the standard grant advisor you would have in a university. Most of you are probably aware of with Horizon 2020, so I won't go into too much detail on this, but Horizon 2020 has 3 different pillars. The excellent science pillar, the industrial leadership pillar, and the societal challenges pillar. Today we will only be talking about the excellent science pillar, and that is also where the Marie Curie grants are part of. Also the ERC grants, they're also part of the excellence science pillar. This pillar is very bottom-up research, so that means that with any topic you can find something interesting there, whereas the other pillars are more top-down, prescribed from specific societal challenges. So Marie Sklodowska-Curie Actions, what are they about? They always focus on international mobility. So if you want to be part of Marie Sklodowska-Curie Action, it basically means that you have to be internationally mobile. So you have to move to a new country, or you must have recently moved to a new country. It's a quite competitive funding scheme. And you can apply with any research topic. So that's also very nice that for everybody it could be a suitable funding scheme. There's 4 different actions. I will spend most of the time today talking about the individual fellowships because those are probably most interesting for you guys here in the audience. So those are personal grants where you can have your own projects for a few years. Then there's also the Research and Innovation Staff Exchange program, which is a consortia program where you can collaborate with different groups and just second people to a different organization for a while. The COVIN program is to set up PhDs or postdoc programs co-funded through the European Commission. And then there are the innovative training networks, and those are to set up PhD networks within a consortium of European partners. I will go into more detail on all of these later on, but these are just the four main actions that are part of the MSCA. Well, the individual fellowships, those are probably the most interesting for most of you. So the individual fellowships are basically a personal career development grant. They are really made to progress in your scientific career, and they support the career development of experienced researchers, so people who already have a PhD or have at least 4 years of research experience. And they do not just focus on research skills, it's very focused on also obtaining skills that are not just related to your research, and also a bit more transferable skills. There are international they're individual fellowships, so they're just for you as a person, but you do apply with a host organization. You have to be employed in an EU member state, so you have to apply with a host organization in an EU member state, and you apply together, you as the researcher together with your host organization. And it's possible to have an individual fellowship both in the academic sector, but also outside the academic sector. So, for example, you could also go to a company for 2 years to do a research project there. And they give you funding for your salary, but they also give you some funding for your research projects itself, to visit international conferences, to do trainings. So there's a lot of additional funding next to just the salary costs that are covered. So the final call of the Horizon 2020 program will be this year, the 2020 call. There's three different budget categories within the overall budget of 328 million, which is available for this call. The biggest part of the budget goes to just the European fellowships, 263 million, and those are fellowships where you are based in a European country or an associated country to the Horizon 2020 program. Countries such as Switzerland or Norway or any other country that is associated. Then there's a specific budget for the Society and Enterprise panel. That's the panel to apply for if you are interested in having your fellowship outside of the academic sector. So for example, in a company or maybe an NGO or a governmental institution. That panel has a specific budget, and in general there's always less applications than just for the standard panel. So the success rate tends to be a lot higher. Then there's the last option, which is the global fellowship, where you spend some time outside the EU. So for example, you will go to the United States or to Australia or to Korea, any third country where you think you could learn some interesting things on your in your research field. And then you have an obligatory return phase when you come back to a European country. So even for this global fellowship, you will still apply with a host organization in Europe. And that's the organization where you will return to after your time spent in the third country. So just a bit of an overview of the differences between the European fellowship and the global fellowship. So in the European fellowship, which is a standard option, you will spend some time in a host organization in Europe, and you are employed by an EU host institution, so a EU mostly academic organization. And you can have a fellowship of a duration between 1 and 2 years. In a global fellowship, you will go to the partner organization outside Europe, and then you will afterwards return to your host organization in Europe. And even in the global fellowship, you remain employed by the European host for the entire duration of the project. So even if you spend 2 years in the United States, you will still be paid by your European organization. And you're just seconded to the third country organization. This fellowship can be 2 to 3 years, and that's a bit depending on how long you go to the third country. There's always an obligatory return phase of a year in Europe, but you can go between 1 and 2 years to the third country. There's quite some eligibility criteria for Marie Curie individual fellowship, so I will explain those now. So a very important part is that you have to be internationally mobile. So that either means that you will move to a country where you have not lived yet for more than 12 months in the 3 years before the call deadline. Or you could, if you, for example, you just arrived in the Netherlands and you would be very interested in applying for an individual fellowship in the Netherlands, that is also possible if you've not been here for over 12 years yet by the time of the deadline. So just to give an example, somebody arrived in November this year from Spain to the Netherlands, and that person would actually like to stay in the host that the person is currently working on an individual fellowship. If you had not lived in the Netherlands any time before you arrived in November 2019, for example, then in September 2020 you have not lived there for more than 12 months yet. So you would be eligible to still apply with the Netherlands as a host country. But, for example, you just moved to the Netherlands, but you've been, before you were working as a researcher in Spain, but you would like to return to Spain, that would not be possible, because in the 3 years before the call deadline, you would have spent more than 12 months in Spain already. So that in that case, it's not possible. Well, maybe I forgot to mention that the call deadline is in September, which is quite crucial, of course, for this information. So you're calculating up to, from the call deadline, you're calculating backwards 3 years, and then look how many years how many months you've spent in a specific country. And it's either the country you worked or where you lived. So if for example, if you were doing some remote master degree in another country, but you haven't physically been present there, you haven't been working there, you haven't been living there, and you have documents to prove that country would still be eligible, for example. So there are quite some possibilities. It's really where you lived and worked. And the next important thing is that you have to be an experienced researcher. So that means that you need to have more than 4 years of research experience, or you need to have your PhD certificate. So you really need to have your PhD already. Even if you just handed in the final version, that's not sufficient. You really need to have defended your PhD and have it physically to qualify. Otherwise, you need more than 4 years research experience. And for the global fellowship, there are some additional restrictions. You need to be an EU national in order to qualify for that, or you need to be a long-term resident in the EU. So that means that you must have lived for more than 5 years in the EU already. And for the global fellowship, the mobility rule applies to the country outside of the EU. So for example, if you are working in the Netherlands for already 5 years, and you want to stay in the Netherlands, you would not qualify for a standard European fellowship because you've spent too long in the Netherlands. But if you want to apply for the global fellowship and you want to go to the United States, then you would be eligible because the mobility rule applies to the United States. And if you've not been working there yet, then you are eligible to go there. By the way, if there's any questions, do not raise your hand on this because it might be...
Maybe I have a question.
Yeah.
You say apply for this grant,
yeah.
But you have to have your PhD already defended in the deadline, or you can have it during the process because it takes...
No. So at the time of the deadline, you need to have your PhD. So just because some people are about to finish their PhD right before the deadline, but unfortunately that's not sufficient. You really you need to wait another year in that case. Or a lot of people take longer than 4 years to do their PhD, then it would also be alright. But if you haven't been doing research for 4 years yet, and you do not have your PhD yet, in that case you will not be eligible yet. You have to wait until you have your PhD. Yes?
Minus 4 years, it means that you have the limit up to 4 years since you're defending?
No. It's 4 years. It's like if you have your PhD, then even if you took less than 4 years, it's fine. If you have your PhD, you're eligible. But if you do not have a PhD yet, you need at least 4 years of research experience. Yeah. Even if you do not have your certificate yet, you will be eligible. Yes. Yeah.
For the global grants, the salary is adjusted to the country that you are applying for?
Yes, I will go into detail on the salaries as well. Yeah, but that's the case. Yes. Then there's 3 different panels, and they have not just the standard mobility rule, but they have a relaxed mobility rule. So for this relaxed mobility rule, it's not about the 3 years before the deadline, but they look at the 5 years before the deadline, and in that 5 years you cannot have spent more than 3 years in the country. These panels, this is the case for the Society and Enterprise panel, so if you want to work outside academia. That's also the case for the Career Restart panel. This Career Restart panel is specifically made for people who had a break in their research career. So people who, for example, had a baby and because of that took a bit of time off work. Or people who were severely ill, people who worked outside research, worked, for example, as a consultant for a while, or went to do something that wasn't research related. If you took a career break for at least 12 months, they need to be 12 months consecutive. In the 18 months prior to the deadline, you can apply for the Career Restart panel. And this panel of this grant is also a bit longer than the standard grant. You can get a project of a maximum duration of 36 months instead of 24. And it has twice the budget of it doesn't have twice the budget of the main panels, but there's a bit of a different budget calculation, so that panel receives more money if you compare it in percentages to the other panels. So it also has a higher success rate. So if you did take a career break, this panel might be interesting to have a look at. And then there's also the reintegration panel, and this is specifically meant for people who worked outside the EU for a specific amount of time and move back to the EU, want to move back to the EU or recently have moved back to the EU. The important thing with this is that you need to have direct mobility from the country where you were working outside the EU to the country where you would like to apply for your individual fellowship. So, for example, you were working in Canada for 5 years, and now you want to move back to Europe to pursue your research career. If you move from Canada directly to the Netherlands, you would be eligible to apply in the Netherlands. Even if you have been back in the Netherlands for a while, you could be back up to 36 months and still apply for this reintegration panel. But if you worked in Canada for a while, moved to Germany for 3 months, but then you decide you want to do a reintegration panel fellowship in the Netherlands, you would not be eligible because it's not direct mobility from a third country to an EU country. So it needs to be in the same country where you came back from right after you left the third country. This panel is also only for people who have an EU nationality or are long-term residents, and it also has a bit of a higher success rate than the other panels. Then within each individual fellowship program, fellowship, there is the option to go on a secondment, and it's actually quite stimulated as well by the European Commission to do a secondment. And in this secondment, you can spend some time at a different organization than the one that you are hosted by. You can use this, for example, to get some experience in a different sector or do something in a different host organization to gain some other skills and knowledge there. They especially stimulate secondments outside the academic sector. So if there's a reason for you to go and learn things outside the academic sector, it's always a big plus if you have something like that in your application. It's not mandatory to do a secondment, and we always advise to only go for a secondment if it makes logical sense within your project and if you can really learn interesting new skills and knowledge there. So don't just put in a secondment because of putting in a secondment. But if you have a nice story on why it would benefit your project, definitely go for a secondment. You can spend a maximum of 6 months on this secondment. And there's no mobility requirements for the secondment. So you can go to any country in the EU or associated countries. So you cannot go to the US, for example. And if you go on a global fellowship, you can also do a secondment at your sending the sending host before you start the project. It's technically not so much a secondment, but they still call it like that. So if you go to, for example, you apply for a global fellowship with an organization where you haven't been working yet before, or in the standard global fellowship programs, you would directly go to the third country and then come back to the host. But if you don't really know the host yet, and maybe you want to get a bit more familiar with the organization, you can also decide to first spend some months in that organization before you go to your third country secondment, your third country stay. And this is deducted though from the time that you can spend in the third country. So from the 24 months maximum that you can apply for that. So there's a lot of different panels and options, and I know that for many people it's often a bit confusing. Which panel should I go for, and what are my options? So we have a quick overview of what options there are and when we think which option is suitable for you. Well, you are eligible for an individual fellowship if you have your PhD or you have over 4 years of research experience. Also, if you want to be internationally mobile or you've just been internationally mobile. And which type to pick is also, of course, an interesting option. If you just want to stay within the European Union, go for the standard European fellowship. If you want to go outside the EU, you could look at the global fellowship. If you want to return to academia after spending some time outside it, you can use the Career Restart panel. If you want to check what's outside academia, you can go for the Society and Enterprise panel. And if you have spent some time in a third country and you want to come back to the EU, you could go for the reintegration panel. So these are basically the 5 flavors there are in the Marie Curie individual fellowships. Yeah.
Is there a limit in the opposite way? Is there a limit of years within you get your PhD that you can apply for a fellowship? Because in many grants you have like, okay, you can apply just if you get your PhD in just 4 years before or something like that.
That's a very good question. Actually, at the moment there's not. However, this call is the last call of the Horizon 2020 program. And in the Horizon 2020 program, there won't be an age limit. But there are discussions going on about Horizon Europe, which is the follow-up program from Horizon 2020. And they are talking about putting a scientific age limit. I actually have a section on Horizon Europe a bit later, a slide as well. So I was thinking about explaining it there. But the thing is, they have so many applications for the Marie Curie Actions each year that they're actually running against the limits of what they can evaluate in a proper way. So the amounts are so high that they really struggle to get evaluators and to get everything evaluated. So they want to like kind of lower the number of people applying a bit, and this is kind of an artificial way to also raise the success rate and to have less applications to evaluate. So they are seriously considering to put a scientific age limit on it. And at the moment there's discussion, is it going to be 5 years? Is it going to be 6 years, 7 years after PhD? Most likely 6 years after PhD. And the exact rules or how this is going to be, it's still not decided yet. It's not even final that this will happen, but I think it's quite likely that it will happen. But for the 2020 call, so the one that's closing in this September, it's not like that. So if you are a quite experienced researcher and you have, for example, 10 years after your PhD, but you would be very interested in applying to this scheme, this year is really the year to go for it, because you don't know, we don't know for sure yet what will happen next year. So that is good to know. I also have some statistics though on the success rates per period as well.
Can you apply to more than one fellowship within the same year?
No. No, so it's not possible to both go for European fellowship and a global fellowship. You really have to apply for one option at a time. Yeah. And
can you be eligible for one European and then 3 years after for a global?
Yes, that's possible. Yeah, as long as if you're still eligible according to the rules, yes, you can do that. Yeah. You have a co-fund individual fellowship from the co-fund program. That's totally unrelated, so you can definitely apply for this. There's no rules about that. No. Okay, so if you get this grant, what kind of money would you actually get? That's always interesting to know, of course. This action works with flat rate. So there's this unit cost of salary that will be given out to everybody who gets the grant, but it is quite different per country because there are country coefficients which are related to the cost of living in a certain country, and of course taxes and those kind of things are very different in each country. But I will go in a bit more detail on the Dutch situation because that's the one I know best as well, and that might be interesting for people here as well. So the standard unit cost in the Marie Curie work program are like this. So there's a living allowance of 4,880 euros. That's just basically salary. Then there's a mobility allowance of 600 euros that you will always get. It doesn't really matter what you do or what panel or what type of person you are. You will always get the mobility allowance, and that is basically meant as a bit of a compensation for you living abroad. You probably have higher costs because you live abroad. You need to go back home for Christmas, or you need to do other family visits, and it's a bit of a compensation for the extra cost that you would endure because you are living outside your home country. And then if you have children that you are supporting, or if you are married or have a registered partnership with a similar status to marriage, you also have the right to family allowance. And it doesn't matter if your family will actually move with you, but if you have a family that you have to support, you will get the family allowance. And besides it, so that researcher unit costs is the amount that you as a researcher will get. But also the organization that is hosting you will get some money for it. They will receive the researcher training and networking costs, which are 800 euros per month, and they will get management and indirect costs of 650 euros a month. So this 800 euros is used for your research project. So you can go to conferences for that. You can spend it on training or workshops or events that you would like to go, but also if you have need some equipment, if there are you need to hire lab time or whatever you would need for your research project, you can spend this 800 euros on. A very important thing to note is that these are the salary ones are gross amounts. So for the Netherlands, there is a country coefficient of 107.9. So that means that this 4,880 goes times 1.079. So you will end up with 5,000 something. However, that is a gross amount. And also the mobility allowance and the family allowance will still be subject to tax and other employer costs. So a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to get such a nice salary if I'm a Marie Curie fellow. In the Netherlands, unfortunately, it's not going to make you rich. You're basically getting probably the same amount as another researcher who is working as a postdoc in the same lab as you. So you won't earn anything. Maybe with family allowance you will earn a bit more, but in general, it's very similar in the Netherlands to the national salaries we have. In other countries, sometimes if people are Marie Curie researchers, they earn a lot more than their fellow colleagues. In the Netherlands, however, the universities are bound by the Dutch labor agreement, so they have to pay you that minimum salary that's in the Dutch labor agreement anyway, and that is quite high, and that's pretty similar to the Marie Curie amount, so you probably earn similar to another researcher. So it's not a way to really have a much better salary than other people will have. We always advise people before you sign your grant agreement and start your project, or maybe even at the time when you're writing your application, ask your host institution if they can give you some simulation of what your salary will be after tax, after deductions and everything, so you have a bit of an idea before you start about how much you will actually get, because we receive many emails from people who are very disappointed with their salary because they think that they're going to earn the amounts that are specified in the work program, but unfortunately in the Netherlands you still have to pay a lot of employer contributions and taxes from that. Yes?
So does the 30% rule apply also for Marie Curie researchers?
If you are eligible for the 30% rule, yes.
Yes. No.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
So this is a bit of a summary of what I just explained. So the mobility allowance is really to cover expenses that you have for relocation, travel expenses. You don't have to show any receipts or show any proof of what you did with this. This is basically for you, and you can spend it however you like. If you don't go to visit your family, that's fine. Like, it doesn't really matter what you spend it on. but you do not have to pay any travel for your research project from this money. So your university cannot say, well, you have a mobility allowance, so you can pay for your own flight to the conference. They're not supposed to do that. They probably won't, but just good to know. And then the family allowance is there for the researchers who are married or have a registered partnership with children. This is actually fixed at the start of your program. So if you are marrying during the project, unfortunately, that will not give you the right to family allowance. It's only if you are married before you start the project, before you sign your grant agreements, that they will take this into account. So in the Netherlands also the mobility allowance and family allowance are subject to tax in most organizations. Some organizations have some nice tax rules that they can give them tax-free, but in universities usually they are taxed. In some other countries you don't have to pay tax on those things, so that makes it a lot more interesting, of course. So the other costs, as I said, they are used for any expenses that are related to your project. I already talked about this, and then the management and indirect cost is, for example, to pay somebody who is a project management in the university. It's more overhead costs if there need to be some ethical things that are worked on, or administrative management. Those things are for the host organization to use on their cost. These costs, the institutional costs, are not for you as a researcher, so you don't know what the university will spend on these, and you cannot say, oh well, I think I still have 500 euros left. I want to have that money because my research was cheaper than this or that. That's really for the university to spend. They must, however, do everything that they promised that you could do in your project proposal. So you should be able to do whatever is in your proposal. And they should pay for that. But if they have money in the end, because you had a very cheap project, it's theirs to keep. So for the next call, the call will open in April, on the 8th of April, and then on the 9th of September this year it will close. The evaluation will take between October and December, and then we expect the results to come out somewhere in February. And then the grant agreements will be signed, and you can start your project between the 1st of March 2021 and the 1st of September of 2022. So you have almost 1.5 years in which you can start your project. So even now, if you think, oh, I'm still finishing another project that I would really like to finish, you could still already apply for this and then just postpone your start date maybe from another project if you are interested in doing something like that. Also, something that people are usually very interested in is the success rates, of course, like how big are the chances that you are getting an individual fellowship. It is a very competitive funding scheme, so the success rates are, they're not amazingly high, but still not too bad. The standard fellowship, this is the last call. These results have just been out a few weeks. The EU's success rate was 13.1% for the standard fellowship. The Netherlands, for some reason, did not that great this year. We're far above the EU average, but we are 12.9 for the standard panel this year. But luckily, we're a lot higher in the other panels. And the global fellowship, as you can see, had a success rate of 24.6, so that's already a lot higher than the standard. The career restart had a average success rate of 20.2 in the EU. The reintegration had a 20.4. The society and enterprise panel had a 27.6% for success rate. And especially in the Netherlands, we were above 50% for that panel, so that's quite good, I have to say. But the average for all the panels together for the EU is 15.2%, and in the Netherlands we had an average success rate of 17.6. So it's a bit depending on which panel you would like to go for. The standard panel is always the most competitive one, because that's what most people are just going for. And all the other ones, they have a higher success rate as well, because there is some more budget allocated to them, because they are considered a more policy priority from the European Commission. That's why they are given a bit more money. Also, something that might be interesting to have a look at is the success rates compared to how far people were in their research career. Because you're probably also thinking, if I would like to go for a fellowship like that, what is the best time to do it? Success rate wise, we see that the people that are most successful are between, well, the most successful are probably 4 to 6 and 7 to 9. But in general, we see that people that are still working on their PhD, so those are the people who do have 4 years research experience but don't have their PhD yet, they tend to for them it tends to be a bit more difficult. And also the people who are very far advanced in their research career tend to have lower success rates. So the majority of the people getting these grants are still quite early in their research careers. Also, if you look at the amount of applications, you see that most people apply within 0 to 3 years after their PhD. These are just the numbers from one call, but they tend to be very similar most years, this distribution like this. So also the reason why the people who struggle, like the people that are a lot further in their research career, why it's a bit harder for them is really because it is a career fellowship. In the application, you really have to talk about what this means for your career, how this can progress your career. Of course, if you are already quite senior in your career, it's a bit harder to come up with a good story of what new skills you will still have to learn, or what you will gain from this new international experience. And if you are very early on in your career, it's a lot easier to come up with a very convincing story about why you need this scholarship for your career. So that's probably why these people struggle a bit. The people and the people very early on in their PhD, they probably have it a bit harder, because also, of course, your CV is taken into account in the application. So if you do not really have a lot of publications yet, or you haven't really have a lot of things to demonstrate that you are an excellent scientist, it's also probably a bit harder to convince the panel that you are the right candidate for this grant. This is just some info on the people that are going to the Netherlands. As you can see, Spain is in the 3rd place, so there's quite a lot of Spanish people going to the Netherlands with the Marie Curie scholarship. And if you want to apply, you have to go to the Funding and Tenders Opportunities portal. Well, you can just create a login and download all the information and create a draft proposal online. Well, you can probably have a look at this yourself if you will. We'll send you the slides, so it's not too interesting to go into details now. But the deadline is always very strict at 5 o'clock sharp. So really, at 5 o'clock, the system will shut down and you cannot apply anything more. So we always advise people to really be on time, preferably even a day before that you have your final version uploaded, because right before the deadline, there tend to be some problems with the portal, because, well, this call has about 10,000 people applying each year. So if 10,000 people are trying to upload things on a portal, unfortunately, the system is not really capable to do that. And that's why sometimes there is some issues with the portal right before the deadline. So that's why we always tell people, be on time, so you're sure that everything with the submitting goes right. So if you write a proposal, there's 2 parts. There are online administrative forms, and that's just information about you, information about your host organization, and also about your supervisor. You always need to have an experienced scientist who is supervising you in your fellowship. And then there's the part B. That's the part where you really go into the content of your project. So the B1 is really the place where you write in 10 pages your whole research proposal. It has 3 chapters, which I will explain in a bit more detail later as well. Excellence, impact, and implementation. And the B2 has some information on your CV. So what have you done until now? Where have you lived? What kind of, what's your background? It has some information on your hosts, on the ethics of your proposal, And it also has a commitment letter for global fellowship. So if you are going to a third country, you need to have a letter from the university where you will be hosted that they are willing to host you during the period of your project. So there's 3 evaluation criteria with a different weighing. The most important one is excellent. Excellence, that's 50% of your score. And they are looking at your proposal to see if your research project, but also the training program that you suggested, and the supervision arrangement that you have, if they are really of excellent quality. So this part is really about the content of your project. Is it a good research project? Is it innovative? Is it interdisciplinary? Is your supervisor, is that a really good scientist that can help you? How does your training program look? Do you have the right skills that you will need for the career that you are looking for? That's just the more content part of the project. And then the second section is the impact section. That is really about how will this program contribute to your career as a scientist. So will you actually, what are your career opportunities after this grant? So you really need to be able to explain what this will bring you. And besides that, you can also write about the impact of your project on your research field, on society, on things like that. So more the outcome of your project. And also, how will you communicate about the outcomes of your project? So communication and dissemination is always a very important part as well in this section. So you have to write about all the different target audiences that you will try to reach, and in what way will you reach them. Of course, you will probably have scientific publications, but how will you reach the general public about your research results? So those are all things that you will have to talk about and explain in the second part of your project. Then the third part, the implementation part, is really about how are you going to execute this project? Is it the planning? Is it all sound? How is the management in the institution? What kind of steps will you take? What will be your deliverables, your milestones, things like that? So that's really more about the concrete execution of your project. The evaluation procedure is a remote procedure. So you have to, your proposal will be assigned to an external reviewer. And those can be anyone. It can be postdocs, and they can also be professors, they can be directors. It's really anyone who has a PhD can sign up to be an expert in the Horizon 2020 expert database. Even for yourself, it might be interesting to register yourself in this database if you want to get some experience evaluating projects. Maybe you are selected to review some proposals one day. 3 people read your project, and they will have to come to a consensus on your project. So this consensus score is the score that you will eventually get. The evaluators, they are on quite a lot of time pressure. So they have a lot of proposals to read, and they have little time. So we always say, like, please don't annoy them with things that makes it very easy for them to think, oh well, I can be bothered to really read this proposal. So make sure that you put everything where it needs to be according to the format. Don't change any of the layouts don't cram everything together in one place. It's all quite common sense, but still a lot of people don't follow the instructions. And just make sure you use some nice boxes and figures to make it a bit more visible what you're writing. So some quick writing tips and tricks. We always say, of course, very standard, take sufficient time to prepare your proposal. So really think about, just thinking about the project probably will take the most time. It's not so much the writing itself, but really, take time for yourself to really think about what you would like with this project and where you would like to go to. And also really think about your career, like where are you now and where would you like to go? Where would you like to be in a few years? If you have a very clear vision of what you would like to do in, for example, 5 years, you could also think back about what would you need, what kind of skills, what kind of training, what kind of supervision do I need in order to get where I want to be in the future. So really think about it from like where do I want to go and think back to what you would need to do in order to get there. Also, the evaluators are can be from a very broad background. So we always advise to not use too much very field-specific jargon without explaining it, and to make sure that it's nice to read for just a general scientific audience. That's basically the audience you need to have in mind when you're writing it. Don't assume that somebody is an absolute expert in your specific sub-discipline. So make sure it's easy to read for people. Well, SMART is probably something that people know. Really make sure that you really, things go into detail, not just be very vague about your planning, but really make sure that things are measurable and really concrete and obtainable. I always really advise people to use the handbook from Net for Mobility Plus. That's the network of Marie Curie NCPs, and they have a handbook on every Marie Curie action, and it's very detailed, it's very long, but they really guide you step by step on how to write a proposal. So using this handbook is really convenient. And another important thing that we always say is really make sure that you get feedback from other people, because if you've been writing this proposal for a few weeks, you probably don't see mistakes, or you don't see where there's information missing or things like that. So make sure you get some fellow scientists to have a look at it. Contact the grant advisors at your university to help you with it. As NCPs, we are also providing feedback on Marie Curie proposals, so make sure that you contact people to give feedback. And also a diverse audience is also nice. You can even let your mother read it, for example, and if she understands it, you're sure that you're on the right track with writing it. So basically this was the IF. Oh, I have to go back. Are there any more questions on the individual fellowship? Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you for your talk. Could you maybe bring up a small to-life example of getting a society and enterprise? Because, well, I'm currently reading it right now, and I'm a bit lost. What could be a person, where it applies to, and etc.
Yeah, so you mean a concrete example? Well, I remember like last year I read one that was actually funded that went to DSM, which is a big company in the Netherlands, and it had to do something with a new type of protein or something with food technology. But it could be, it's basically also a research project, but there can be a specific enterprise or a specific NGO that needs the results of this project. So that's why they would be interested in hiring you to do that project. I also read one last year that actually wasn't funded, but was somebody who was going to work for an NGO and do field work in Bolivia about women's rights and things like that. So there's a lot of different questions that the non-academic sector might have, where you as a researcher might be able to give them the answer to a specific question they would have in their field.
But if a non-academic center like DSM, a huge company, needs to answer some question, why wouldn't they pay themselves?
Yeah, of course they. But this program is actually out there because if you look at researchers' careers, there's a very small percentage of researchers, as most of you know, that will actually end up in permanent positions in academia. So Marie Curie really wants people to stimulate young researchers to look beyond academia as an interesting career opportunity for researchers, because there are plenty of opportunities for scientists outside academia, of course, and most people will eventually transition outside academia. So there's more policy objective behind it. And this whole interdisciplinary, transsectoral or intersectoral skills is something that Marie Curie really values for people. So, of course, big companies can pay for their own research, but there's some policy objectives behind why the EU is funding this.
Okay, and maybe the last turning question on this topic. So basically your roadmap would be you select a company that might need your expertise, you talk it over, you find some common ground, and then you go to Marie Curie and say, I want the money. Right?
Yeah, if you as a researcher are interested, there might also be a company that is actually posting some advertisement for looking for a scientist who wants to do that, and that way you get into contact with the company. It might also be just because you're already working in project where you are working with the non-academic sector. It doesn't have to be a company, you know. It can also be another non-profit organization that is. It doesn't have to be a big industry organization, of course. But you, in some way, you get into contact with this organization. Then, together with the supervisor, you come up with a project. You write the project. The process is the exact same as if it was for academia. The only thing is the host is not an academic institution, but also the project itself, the way it's structured, the application forms are all similar. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have another question. So for these grants, it's very important also the host institution. So actually it will be evaluated. Do you have any suggestion for the people how to find a proper host institution? What are the things that you have to pay attention for?
Yeah, I would first of all look for the supervisor. So think about which researcher is out there somewhere in Europe where you would think this person is really somebody I would like to learn from. Like, I think the supervisor is probably even more important than just the host. Of course, the host is in a way important that they can give you the environment that you need for your research organization. But I would go through contacting supervisors that you are interested in supervising you, and if they are willing to host you, they can probably put you in contact with their grant office and maybe arrange things if they are able to host you and things like that. But I don't know, like the quality of the host institution as such, like I don't know so much about other countries, but in the Netherlands I think all universities are like good enough universities to be host organizations for IF, and I think in most countries that's similar. But of course, universities that have a lot of experience with individual fellowships are also, of course, that helps. If they have a whole infrastructure you can demonstrate in your application already that they know how to manage a project, how to help you and help you integrate in the organization and things like that. So that might help. Looking for organizations that have quite some experience with individual fellowships. Yeah.
So I think we move.
I will be back a lot, but
So now we will have Carlos. He did the PhD in Madrid, actually in the same place that I did my PhD, and he got a Marie Curie Fellowship to come to the NFI. You got it 3 years ago?
Yes, 3 years ago.
Yeah, and actually this is one of these success stories, and he will explain us how he managed to get the grant and how it was his experience.
Okay. Thank you, Elena. And thank you, Mariëlle. I hope I can answer some of your questions and also give you some tips if you are eager to apply to this kind of fellowships. This is just an example, but it's a specific example of one of those society and enterprise fellowships. So maybe it's a little bit different, but not that much. You will see. Where is the... Yes. So yes, I defend my thesis in Madrid, and yeah, after that the scary part starts. I was lucky because I had extra 1 year and a half of extra salary, so then I had enough time to think about my own future. I had, as you can imagine, different options. The only one that wasn't an option was to stay working in the same place with the same people. My promoter told me that she didn't have the money to hire me and to give me another opportunity in her group. So then I started looking for different options, and the Marie Curie Actions were my priority because I could also work in several projects during my PhD funded by these actions, among them the Nights, the Marie Curie Nights. I don't know if you know that panel. This kind of call is for the European Research Night that happens only once a year, and it's about communication and outreach activities. So yeah, I decided to apply to this call, to the individual fellowship. So it was super clear to me that I wanted to continue doing science, but where? Industry, academia, in Spain, abroad, was quite attractive for me to go again abroad and continue my studies or my career in a different country. So I went to a conference and I met the guy, as you said before, this supervisor, someone that I wanted to learn from. And talking to him, I told him, hey, what if I apply to one of these calls? He didn't know about these calls at the time. With you, and I move to the Netherlands if I get the funds. And he said, okay, let's do it. I will support you, I will help you out. Do you have an idea? I said, yes, I have an idea. So then we start a nice discussion. And I attended to one of these workshops, but in Madrid. So there is also in Madrid a contact point, a colleague of Mariëlle, he is Jesus Rojo, and he explained me all about these fellowships. And actually he told me, do you already know where are you going to carry out your research? I said, I don't know. I know the guy. I know he's a professor at the University van Amsterdam, but I don't know anything else. And he told me, yeah, it's a pity that would you like to do this, but in a industry or in a non-academic environment? I said, yeah, if I get the funds, I don't mind to do it, or in the academia or in a different place. So he told me about this new society and enterprise panel. I didn't know what was the meaning of a panel at that time, but he explained me everything, and he told me, if you apply through this panel, probably, the success rate will be very high. Probably you will get one of these fellowships. So then I talked to my supervisor again, and he told me, yes, but beside he was a professor at the University of Amsterdam, but beside that, he was also a kind of manager at the Netherlands Forensic Institute, a non-academic institution, actually a governmental institution. So I contacted again Jesus Rojo, and he told me, yes, you are eligible for this kind of panel, so go for it. Then, but I wanted to still be linked to the academic environment. So these secondments are the best option to do this. So I spent 3/4 of my project working at the Netherlands Forensic Institute in The Hague, and 6 months working in a university in Amsterdam, at the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, which is my current employer. So yeah, this was my design. So I had a supervisor, we had an idea, a beneficiary institution, the Netherlands Forensic Institute, a partner organization for my secondment, so combining a governmental institution and the academia, somehow also the industry through their partners and colleagues, but not fully related to this action. So yeah, we plan a strategy, we start writing, and as I am a very good student, I learn from you, from the contact points, and yeah, I planned everything in advance. I started writing my proposal by April or so, or March, when the call ends, the deadline of the call is September. Then, as I was in Madrid, mainly writing this and doing outreach activities and supervising students, but mostly wrapping up and finishing all the work there. Then I decided to visit the institutions. So I came to the Netherlands for 2 months to have fun, as you can see there in that picture, but also to learn from them, to meet them, to know the facilities, to write together the proposal. So I wrote the first draft, but after that, during July and August, we sit together, we saw all the possibilities, we improved the proposal, the project proposal. So that was key to get the funds. So yeah, in February we got very good news. So officially I was moving to the Netherlands with this project. It was called PyroProf. This is also a piece of advice for you. Find a good name. You will use it afterwards, non-stop, during the implementation of your action. And the title should be informative and as short as possible. Some tips about the writing, about the project proposal itself. Make good tables and even better figures. I made this figure, the one that you see in that corner. I've been using that figure non-stop during the whole, during these 2 years. It's a summary of the work packages of this project, a summary of the partial aims, and the final goal of the action of the project. And also give an idea of the different products that we wanted to achieve or produce by the end of the project. Also, show in your proposal how are you going to implement this action. One of these Gantt charts works very well. You can explain month per month what is going on, what is going to happen. So first 3 months training for the fellow, and after 6 months we expect a publication, or we will attend to a conference, or by the end of this work package we would like to communicate this to I don't know, to a journal or to the general public or whatever. So that helps a lot to plan properly your project. You should plan as well a career development plan. This is very important because this is an individual fellowship. You should think that this grant should lead you to the next level. You should reach the next level of your career by this action. So try to plan train activities for yourself. Try to mention in your proposal all those things that you want to learn during these 2 years. Of course, you should mention who is going to teach you, or if it's, I don't know, a company offering you a course, or a professor that is also working in the same institution. He can or she can teach you certain kind of methodologies or skills, whatever. I recommend you to delegate tasks as well. To write a very ambitious project is not that wise. If you say in your proposal, I want to learn this and that, and I will be in charge of this and that, but we need also to do other stuff, other things, but as you don't have the time, you don't know, you don't have the knowledge, you will delegate these other things in other expert, other people. You will learn from them, but the main responsible of that part of the project will be other people. You cannot do everything by yourself. And if you are very ambitious, afterwards you will struggle implementing the action. So just promise what you are able to do or capable to do by the end of the project. My opinion is that you need an excellent dissemination and communication plan. This is key for the European Commission. We have to communicate and disseminate all our results to as much targets as possible. So different layers of our society. Talk about your project, about your results to your colleagues in the lab, but also talk to other experts of your field, other scientists related or not to your expertise. Try to communicate your action to journals. Just post on your Twitter account or in your LinkedIn what you are doing or the aims of your project. Try to reach the general public as well through one of those Marie Curie nights or some open doors sessions, things like that. you should explain all these things, that action, that plan in your proposal. I think it's very important and counts around 30% of the evaluation. And also, you should explain very well the risk of this project. You have to show your plan A, but also to have a plan B and C, if so, to solve all those possible problems that might appear along the implementation of the action. We made this table trying to assess the different risk of our action, and actually the reviewer told us that we didn't take into account another risk, and because of that they gave us less points at the end of the evaluation. But try to think in all the possible scenarios. They are giving you money, they are giving you a lot of responsibility, so they want you to be prepared for any kind of eventuality. Okay? And it's called individual fellowships, but I don't think this is that individual. It's true that they are funding you. It's the biggest part of the budget is for your salary, but the action has to be implemented by you and more people. Not only your supervisor, other people that might work together with you in the laboratory, people working in a different institution where you will do your secondment. Try to delegate, as I said, to collaborate with as much people as possible. For instance, this is the explosive and explosion team of the Netherlands Forensic Institute. All of them have contributed in one way or another to this project. They are also co-authors of our publications. I had up to, I don't remember the name, the number, 11 different students, all kind of students, PhD students, master students, bachelor students, HBO, MLO students, helping me in the lab, learning from me, developing all kind of tools for this project. I cannot do everything by myself, but if I supervise people, I learn other skills, I get other different kind of skills, and at the same time I'm transferring knowledge and spreading the word. So keep also in mind that this is key for a success, for the final success of your project. Okay, and that's it. So if there is any question. We can discuss later, otherwise.
No questions, so thank you very much. It was
welcome.
very inspiring, I would say. So we have again Mariëlle back. She will tell us now about another type of grants. They're individual fellowship as well, but the scheme is a bit different. They are called co-funds and RISE.
Yes.
And then afterwards we will have Elena also sharing her experience.
So RISE is basically a collaborative action within Horizon 2020 Marie Sklodowska-Curie Actions. I'm not sure if there are many people for you right now who will be that interested in it, because it is probably not something that you would typically think of when you are thinking about the Marie Sklodowska-Curie action. But but it is a research and innovation staff exchange program. So what in this program you are jointly setting up a research program where you have in a consortium different short exchanges of staff to exchange information. The main the main goal behind this is also to promote international collaboration, and with international I mean collaboration between the EU and countries outside the EU, and intersectoral collaboration. So that's collaboration between academia and industry, and to foster a shared culture of research and innovation. So really to together to have similar ideas. So in this project, you need to have a joint research and innovation activity. So you start from a project itself, but the only way that the only thing you will receive money for is to second staff. So together you will work on a research project, but you will exchange staff in order to do so. But these can not only be researchers, they can also be more technical staff, support staff, they can be early stage researchers, but also very experienced researchers. It's basically open to any type of staff working in one of the organizations that's part of a consortium. The rules are quite complicated, I have to say. But the projects are a maximum of 4 years, and each person can go on secondment for 1 to 12 months per secondment. But the person who goes on secondment always has to return to the organization where they are based. For the whole consortium, you can get 540 researchers months for the project, and there's no minimum size of type of consortium that you can establish, but you need to have some impact with your project. So it probably will not be selected if you just have a consortium of like 3 organizations or something like that. There's more mobility rules, so that makes it a bit easier. But you can only second staff that has been working at your organization for at least 6 months before they will go on secondment. In order to have a good consortium, you need at least 3 participants in 3 different countries, and at least 2 of those participants need to be from 2 different member states or associated countries. And if all the organizations are in an EU member state or associated country, you'd need to have at least 1 academic organization and 1 non-academic organization. This is basically what it looks like in practice, these rules. So the first option would be, this is all thinking about if you just have the minimum amount of organizations in your consortium. The first option is that you will have 2 member states, academic organizations, and 1 third country, probably academic organization. And then the second option is that you have 3 organizations that are all based in an EU member state, but at least 1 of them has to be non-academic. So the main thing with RISE, your secondments need to be either international, so that means EU, non-EU, or intersectoral, that means academia to non-academia, or vice versa. So that's very important to keep in mind, that it's really about this intersectoral mobility and international mobility. Yes? Associated country. Yeah, so all the country. Oh, TC, oh sorry, third country. This is very much Horizon 2020 lingo, member states, associated countries, and third countries. So a third country is basically any country that isn't associated to the EU programs or a member state. Yes, for example, yeah. Yeah. I think I saw another question, or no? There we go. Here we have a bit of a closer look at the secondments. So the secondments that are eligible to receive funding are either the secondments that go from academic to non-academic, or from a member state to a third country. If you want to do a secondment from a third country to a member state, that could also be eligible for funding, but that depends on which third country it is. There is a big list of countries that can receive funding in this case from the EU. That's because they have some bilateral agreement with the EU on scientific cooperation. A lot of these countries, though, are developing countries and not so much the countries that most academic organizations would like to work with. So, for example, the United States, Canada, those countries are not eligible for secondments that are from third countries to the EU. You can still send people from the EU to those countries, though, and receive funding for it. So a typical project has around 10 organizations normally, and the people usually do quite short secondments, the people that are participating in the program. The average is 2.2 months of secondments per participant. But there's a lot of different variations. There is a lot of very different sizes. Some are very big programs, and some are a bit smaller. In the Netherlands, I have to say that RISE is very unpopular. There's not many universities willing to participate in a RISE project because it's quite complicated, and in the end there's not that many people who are actually willing to do these secondments actions. But I know, for example, in Spain, it's enormously popular. A lot of Spanish universities really use RISE a lot, especially to collaborate with South America, because that's probably very interesting for Spain, of course. The content of the project can be anything. It has to be connected to some research problem that you're together working on, of course. But how you set up the different secondments can also vary a lot. Most networks, though, have third countries, academic and non-academic, all in one network, I have to say. But there's not really an average project, so it's hard to give a bit of a global overview. Yeah?
Maybe I miss it. Between a RISE and an ITN?
An ITN is a PhD training program, and this is not a PhD training program. This is really just an exchange program. It's a bit like a very big Erasmus program for researchers, to say. It's really exchanging people for a short duration to exchange knowledge. So it's very different from an ITN project, yeah. It has similarities to cost. The cost is a networking project. This has research. This is actually, you are working on a research project as well. In cost, it's more really about building the network, and but the type of costs that are eligible are a bit similar to the things that you would do in cost actions, because the research hours that you would do are not, you're not getting any money for it. I will go into the, this is the funding model, and that maybe explains a bit why it's not so popular in the Netherlands. But the money you receive is only an allowance for the people that will go on exchange. So the people who are in this, during this secondment, they will get €2,100 per month to cover for their expenses during their stay abroad. And then the institution will get some research training and networking costs and some management and indirect costs. But in the end, you do not get any money to fund hours working on research. And that's why many Dutch universities are not too interested in it, because they have to send some staff members away for a few months, and then during that time that the people are away, they have to hire maybe somebody to replace that person to teach or things like that, and it will cost them more money than they get. So they tend to only choose this action if they want to do something with these organizations anyway, and if it's really something that's a logical step to take. That's also what we always advise. Don't go for a RISE project for the money, but do it because you want to you were already planning to work together on this research project with these specific partners, and this is just a nice way to compensate some of the expenses you will have, because you will have to visit each other a lot and things like that. So that's really what RISE is for. So it's kind of an odd project compared to all the other Marie Curie actions. It's really an exchange program. Yeah, that's also why I was thinking only talk briefly about it, because I don't know if there's people in the room who are thinking about applying for a RISE, or if you are, do not hesitate to contact us later to talk a bit more in detail about it. But as I thought it's probably not the most relevant action for all of you, I gave you a quick introduction, and do not hesitate to contact me if you have any more questions about it. Also, in Spain, they know a lot about it, so your Spanish national contact point is probably a better person to approach about this, because we in the Netherlands do not do many RISE projects. But of course, always welcome to ask us things about it. Another thing I would like to briefly mention is the COVEN program. So the COVEN program is for joint doctoral or fellowship programs. In these programs, an institution or multiple institutions are setting up doctoral and fellowships programs. So it's either going to be a program that trains PhD students or a postdoc program. And a share of the program is paid by the European Commission, but the other share is paid by the institution themselves from whatever funding sources they use for it. It can be their own money, it can be national funding, it can be regional funding, it can be any type of funding. The COVEN programs can be regional, or they can be national, but they can also be international, so that there's multiple institutions from multiple countries working together offering this program. Yeah, the maximum EU contribution per program is 10 million, and the programs last between 36 to 60 months on average. And you get about 50% of the salary of researchers in the project covered by this grant. And the organizations also receive a fixed cost per month per researcher that they're recruiting in their project, just to manage the program. What is probably more interesting for you is to know, how do I find positions that are open through a COVEN program? So there's a lot of different COVEN programs in Europe. And these programs are recruiting researchers for PhD positions, but also for postdoc positions. And the Eurexus portal is the place to find any jobs that you are interested in. You can even select there that you want to see vacancies that are posted under the Marie Curie COVEN program, and then it will filter all the different jobs that are available at the moment for this specific action. I know also the Eurexus portal for Spain even has a specific page with all the COVENs that are running in Spain. Spain has a lot of COVEN programs. The Netherlands unfortunately doesn't have a page like that. But I did look into our data and selected a few COVEN programs that were selected in the past years. Actually, I've also looked if some of them were recruiting at the moment, and the only one that I could find that was recruiting is the one from Maastricht University that is currently recruiting 2 PhDs. But all the other ones, I think the positions have been filled. But you can, of course, have a look. Some have multiple calls, so that maybe 1 or 2 years later they're recruiting people again, because they often recruit in different cohorts. So, of course, if there is any topic that you think, oh, that really sounds interesting to me, have a look at the websites to see, or send them even an email if they're going to have another round for recruitment. And then there's also 2 COVEN programs that were selected in the Netherlands just a few weeks ago. So there's no info online about it yet, but I thought it might be interesting to share with you. So there's a doctoral program at TU Eindhoven and also a postdoc program at TU Eindhoven that has been selected for funding in the last COVEN round. And they're going to be quite big programs, I think, so they will probably have a lot of positions. So keep an eye on the Euraxis portal if you would be interested in those. Yeah, so that's basically what I had to say on co-fund. Are there any questions about that? It's maybe good to tell as well about co-fund that the recruitment procedure is very different from, for example, a Marie Curie individual fellowship. It's basically a normal job application. So you apply for a position through a job advertisement that they will have. You will still have to comply with the mobility rule though. So you cannot apply for a position in a country where you've lived for more than 12 months in the past 3 years. So that rule is similar from the individual fellowship. And besides that, it's just a recruitment procedure. And every university will have their own recruitment procedure. You will probably have to do multiple rounds with an interview and maybe other assessments that depending on the vacancy. And salary-wise, you will be paid according to the Dutch labor agreement. So just the normal Dutch researcher salaries you will receive. Any other questions on co-fund or RISE? Elena, right?
So, as I said before, now we have Elena as a speaker, also explaining us her experience with the co-fund. So she did also the PhD in Madrid, and then she came for a secondment to the LUMC. And when she was here, she decided, okay, I want to come as postdoc also after my PhD here. And then at this time, there was at the LUMC some co-funds that were called leading fellows. I think there were like 15 different grants open.
There was 90 actually.
So it was between LUMC.
I will explain that. Yeah,
okay,
so 5 different institutions.
Better we listen to Elena.
Yeah,
thank
you very much for your nice introduction. And also thank you, Mariëlle, for your also introduction on the Marie Curie co-fund talks. Projects, I mean. So as Elena said, I belong to the Leading Fellows postdoc program. That is basically a Marie Curie co-fund. This is my trajectory. So I did my PhD in Spain, and then in March 2017, I defended my thesis. And then during this time, I did 2 internships. And I think this was also a key part for me to get also my next step as a postdoc, as I will also mention later. So then I was working as a research project manager, but I was still doing research. And then what happened in the meantime is that in September of that year, I applied for the Marie Curie Individual Fellowship. And then I also applied for a postdoc fellowship at my former institution, which was basically kind of like a bridge for you to find future postdoc opportunities abroad, basically. So I applied for those, and then I also heard about the Marie Curie co-fund. So I applied. I didn't mention, but for my Leading Fellows co-fund project, it had 3 different calls. So I applied for the second one. And unfortunately, basically what I did was to adjust the proposal I previously sent for the individual fellowship. I sent it also, I had to adjust it, of course. But it was also, for me, possible to use the project itself for the co-fund. So I don't know how other postdoc Marie Curie co-fund work, but at least for the Leading Fellows, we also had to prepare up like a proposal, and it was also like evaluated for, the procedure was slightly different, of course, from the individual fellowship, but we also had to submit a proposal. Unfortunately, I didn't receive yet the comments from the individual fellowship, so I couldn't take those into account for the co-fund. But later, in February, I got the bad news that my individual fellowship was not granted. Well, it's not a big surprise because it's so competitive that, you have to be prepared. It may happen. But I got the other postdoc fellowship that I applied for. That was good. So then in July 2018, I started as a postdoc in Spain. And then right after I started, I received the message like I got the Marie Curie co-fund project accepted, so that was really great news. And I started in November that year. So I'm going to talk about, very briefly, about the Leading Fellows program, as I also already mentioned at the beginning of my talk. So it's a postdoc program, which is basically, the objective was to hire 90 different postdocs in 5 different institutions. It was the TU Delft was the beneficiary, because in this kind of project, there should be 1 beneficiary plus, in this case, 4 different partners, which was the EUL, the LMC, and then both the Erasmus Medical Center and the Erasmus Rotterdam, University of Rotterdam. And here I just copy-paste the Cordis information, in which, well, you can see that in this case for this project. So it's a co-fund, right? So 50% of the salary and all the cost was covered by the European Commission. That's around 6 million. And then the rest was paid by the different institutions. So, well, these are briefly the goals of the Leading Fellows program. So its first aim was that the young researchers could be expanding the skills, also to build up a network. They also aim for intersectoral and interdisciplinary research training. And also, of course, it was very important to have the international mobility, as well as to create this kind of networks between non-academic institutions or academic institutions. So, well, I just don't want to go much more into that, because what I want to focus on my talk is to actually give you some advice on how the writing process was. It doesn't matter if you are thinking about applying for a Marie Curie co-fund, it could also be applying. I think what I'm going to talk about is also important for basically any kind of grant. It could also be a Marie Curie individual fellowship or whatever. So in the case of the Marie Curie co-fund that I applied for, it had this kind of scheme. So a summary, research proposal, training plan. Probably you could also have something like this in your topic, in your proposals. So it was about like 12 pages, let's say. So what I want to highlight about if you are willing to write a proposal, then what's important also in the summary is that it should be standing on its own, which means that someone that doesn't read your whole proposal should be able to know what you want to do. And also you shouldn't really talk about a lot of complicated terms. It's also something that Mariëlle also described before. So it's something that you shouldn't be too specific on the terms, but more like, okay, so what's your plan? What you gonna achieve with this project? So you should also, well, of course, these are most obvious things, like properly introduce what is the problem of your project, how you are going to do it, and also what is also important is that you should enable or to redescribe what they call it, this two-way knowledge transfer, meaning that so you have like experience on some topics, but you are going to work with the host institution, the host research group, right? So what are the benefits for you to go to this group, and what is the research group going to benefit from your expertise? So that's something that you also really need to stress. And as we also heard before, it's very important to know what's your long-term goal in order to explain what is the rationale behind your project. Like, so okay, I want to have the Marie Curie, not only because it's a prestigious grant, but also because you want to go somewhere. And so you have to really explain what you want to do. So maybe it could be if you want to become an API, or you want to just start your own spin-off company, yeah, anything. So this was kind of the layout that we had to focus on when we were writing the Marie Curie, the co-fund, the Leading Fellows. So, for example, it's also very important if you already have some preliminary data on the project that you are going to apply for. If you also have to very specify the specific research goals. So as we also mentioned, it's very important to have a picture or diagram showing exactly the workflow that you want, so that someone that doesn't even read your proposal just take a look at your picture and then say, okay, I know what this person is saying that he's going to do. Of course, you have to really stress what is the originality of your project. And, well, other stuff, like the methodology, planning, and also you have to, at some point, explain very well that your project will be, in the host institution, they have the appropriate infrastructure and everything that you need to actually carry it out. Also, not only on the infrastructure point of view, but also that everyone have involved in the project has the expertise. So this is the picture that I included in my proposal, where I could explain the 4 different aims of my project, for example, and how it followed like a natural workflow. So, well, you can find something like that. Or it's very important also, even before writing, I think it's important that you have in your head the idea, what you want to do, how you want to do it, and then try to make a draft of a picture or a kind of a scheme, and then on that you can build up the project. So as I said before, it's important that you know what's your expertise or your skills, and then what's the host group's expertise, and then the link between those should be your project. So then again, you have to really specify what are you bringing to the research group and what are you going to learn new. So for example, in my case, well, I'm an analytical chemist with experience in metabolomics using a particular technique, and which I already have interaction with the previous host group. So what I wanted to do is to really embed into this research group, because, well, in my case, I'm working in the human genetics department. So, and yeah, the research group where I'm in is like very focused on biology, and then they are experts in polycystic kidney disease, which is the disease I'm studying right now. And then they are also experts in creating this mouse model. So what I'm bringing is my expertise in metabolomics and also these other sets of techniques. And I want to do metabolomics on this particular disease. And on top of that, I also said, okay, so because, for example, in metabolomics, there are like mainly 2 different techniques that you can use. So I already knew on mass spectrometry, but I wanted to learn a new one, which is NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance. So then I also decided I wanted to learn this technique. And then also at the LUMC, they also have the infrastructure available, and the Center of Proteomics and Metabolomics. So yeah, this is basically how we also developed the research project around. Also for the Leiden Fellows, they also focus on the training plan. You had to really specify how you are going to develop your career prospects. So we also we also needed to maybe include our secondment or not. So that's also something nice. Especially if you do it in the private sector, they also evaluate it really positively. And you also have to acquire like a set of different skills. They also like that you develop new soft or transferable skills. So there are also available courses for that. So I will suggest that if you want to apply for any kind of grants like this, just take a look, in the near place. Like if there are any available courses that you can also apply for, so that you should, when you are writing your grant, you should really specify, okay, so in the case I get the grant, I would like to do these and these courses which are held in whatever institutions, or so that the committee or the reviewers or whoever that is going to read your proposal say, okay, so these people, this person really has it clear, he knows or she knows what they are going to do, or so I think that's important. And then, well, it's also important that at least in the Leiden Fellows, they also value that you were embedded in a multidisciplinary area or multidisciplinary topics. So in my case, it was also very straightforward because I came from really like a chemical background, and then I merged into the biology area. So that's something to keep in mind. And then also it's important that you say, based on your long-term goal, what's like the next step. So okay, let's say you will get the Marie Curie. So what's your next step? Are you going to apply for future grants, or what's your next step? So everything should be very, very, maybe something that you may think of, maybe this is not relevant, or no, they really know, they really want to know that you have everything at least thought of. So, well, in my case, for example, I chose different courses among the ones I'm showing here. So, for example, as I said, I wanted to learn more about nuclear magnetic resonance, NMR. So then I already went to the Imperial College London to get like a 1 week course there. And I also got another course here to focus more on biostatistics. So then we also had, of course, to include the CV, so that's also an important part in the in the proposal. So I would say that do not just make like a list of your publications, because it's as you said, boring. Just, they will just say, okay, you have 5, you have 10, whatever publication, that's okay. But what I recommend, and I also, because most of the things I'm showing here are not only based on what I think, but also during my writing process, I could really get a lot of feedback, and so that's what I'm basically showing. So just, I will recommend that you should make it like really easy to follow, like very distinguished paragraphs that, because just imagine that the people who are going to read your proposal, probably they have 10 more on the desk, right? So you really have to make them, and usually they will do this on their free time or weekends, or so just try to make it more easy for them. So then also, do not just include like a list of publications, just try to include a small paragraph, maybe like a couple of sentences saying why this article is important. It's not just because it's published in this best journal, because I'm not sure now how it goes for the Marie Curie. Are you still allowed to include the impact factor and okay? Because sometimes they are a little bit fuzzy. Yeah, like sometimes, at least because I am also applying for, I apply for the Benny, and then there is like no H index or whatsoever. So it's, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. So then, well, you can still put the impact factor, but yeah, I think there are more indexes that maybe are important. I don't know, number of citations or whatsoever. And then other things, of course, that you can include at the communication to conferences, whether you have organized workshop or, and then, well, other activities like I put there. And then I will also recommend that you include a link to an update research portal like ResearchGate or any of those. So just like a take-home message from my talk, I know it's a difficult task. The writing part is very stressful and very uncertain, of course. So just believe in your idea, believe in yourself, and just don't think that, for example, some people get upset because they think they don't have enough publications, but that's, at least in the Marie Curie, I wouldn't say it's the most important thing. There are more things that they are looking for, whether you have a nice track record towards your objective, or so that's. And then, at least in my case, this worked. So I applied both for the individual fellowships and this other Marie Curie co-fund. And well, at least 1 out of 2 worked, so that's okay. And then, so just, I will also suggest that you take a look at the website, also EURACCESS, and then take a look if you are really willing to pursue a postdoc in the Netherlands or outside. Just take a look and then see what works best for you. And then I will really say that if you have already a previous interaction with the host institute, I think that's a very advantage. So if you are really thinking, okay, I want to work with this PI or this group, not only talk to them and say, okay, I think they seem nice, but I will recommend you spend 1 or 2 months also working with them, because not only because of you, I mean, because I can also imagine maybe things don't work out or you think this is really good, but then at the end of the day, you are working with them and then like, okay, I'm not comfortable, or don't feel it's too much pressure, or because people just work in different ways. So I think it's very critical for you, especially, to get to know the people you are working with beforehand. And also because if you write down in your proposal that you have already interaction with that group, I believe, of course, because it's like also what Carlos said. At the end, they had the money, they are thinking, should I give it to this or to this other person? So then if you already prove that this has worked in the past and maybe is also going to work, so that's, I think it's something to keep in mind. Also be specific and also realistic. Don't be super ambitious saying I will do this and this and that, because so from what you think you can do, just try to exclude like a 20% or something, because then it's not only because you will be overwhelmed, but also the person reading will have questions and whether you are being too ambitious or not. And then very important, even though I put it in the last point, make sure you get feedback from people, from not only from your research group, from your department, but also from peers. That's really key. Also, of course, the contact points, the funding advisors. They will have probably also another proposal that were accepted. Take a look, read them, just get feedback. And I just also included my email there for if you have more questions, or just if you want me to read your proposal also, I will be, if I can help. And well, just to finish, this is some picture from the Living Fellows. So that's has also been a really nice way of meeting people, because we are 90 researchers, but we are also from really, really different backgrounds, from history, arts, and also science, more related to technology. So it's really nice a nice experience all in all. So yeah, thanks. Any questions? Or just in the coffee break?
One question.
Yeah, sure.
You say that you use the same proposal from the individual fellows that for the co-fund.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that you change that make, let's say, the change that makes that they give you the grant and not in the previous?
Yeah, that's a little bit tricky. So, for example, because so I applied for the individual fellowship first, and then I applied for the co-fund before getting the feedback from the individual fellowship. But in the meantime, of course, when you have the idea, even though you have your project finished, like the proposal already written, the more you work on it, the more things you think of. So one of the things that I changed, and I think that was also key, is because I planned too much at the beginning. I included, I think, 2 secondments. I was maybe too much, and then that was, for example, one of the things that I got like a negative comment in the individual fellowship, but I didn't do it in the co-fund. So yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to know what made me work or not, because it's 2 different procedures of selection. So yeah, but I think that was also something important.
I got a question for both of you. The co-fund, is that the university is saying, I want to hire some postdocs, but there is no project behind that, and then the applicants, they have to develop a project and then it will be accepted or not? Or how does it work exactly? I mean, regarding the EU, I mean, they just give money without knowing what it's going to be about or what's going to happen?
Depends per project. There are co-fund projects where they already have decided, like they will have never really have the really concrete projects developed, but sometimes they have specific areas where they want to hire specific people on. So then, and not always you already have to write a full research proposal at the application stage. That also depends a bit per application procedure. But sometimes you have to write a proposal maybe within a specific topic. Sometimes it's completely free. You can really come up with, I don't know how that was in your case.
Yeah, this really was kind of also like very bottom-up approach, like I mentioned. So it's just basically yeah, you had to write whatever that made sense scientifically, and of course they give you like an outline of what you have to do, but then of course you just submit it, and then it goes also for this kind of a selection process, and if it's funded, then it is so.
Yeah. So if the organizations that apply for a co-fund program, they have to in their application for the co-fund program, they have to say how their application process for the fellows will be. So they specify if they want people to write a whole research proposal, if they have specific topics they want people who will be the supervisors.
But then the final selection will be made at the host institution and not by the EU.
Yes, and one thing I wanted to add on your, you said that it's really good to get to know the supervisor and thing, and I think for IF that's very, very good. I think it really helps to write good applications. With co-fund, I would say be careful with that, because they are part of a co-fund program, the universities that are, they have to stick with specific, really transparent, open, transparent recruitment procedures from the EU. So they don't want to have any appearance that they picked you because you already work there. So I would be a bit careful with spending too much, or like having too much contact with the prospective supervisor if you're applying for a co-fund procedure. Yeah, of course, asking questions, getting to know them would be fine, but really, I'm not sure if you do like an internship or something before. In your case, it was of course years ago, so that's fine. But they have to recruit people that are eligible, of course, so they stick to all the rules, but they also have to demonstrate in audits and things that they really didn't have any favoritisms, or that they hired people because they already had connections with them. They have to demonstrate that to the EU, so that's why they're often very careful to not get any appearance that they maybe hired somebody because they already knew the person.
Yes, okay. So, yeah, but I still think what I wanted to say is that it's important that that you demonstrate that then it's going to work out. And yes, of course. It's yes, more on that sense. Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you again for all the speakers of the first part of the meeting. We have now a coffee break. Please follow these two guys here. So it's in the ground floor, so we have to go down. So just be aware that you don't lose them. Okay? And we will be back in 30.
Hello? No. Okay. So welcome again. So we continue now with Mariëlle. She will talk now about ITMs.
So, last bit for me. Afterwards, you can finally listen to somebody else. So now I will talk about the innovative training networks part of Marie Curie. Maybe this is also not a funding scheme that you are right now be interested in applying for, but maybe it's good to know. Oh, well, Carlos is saying maybe he is interested in. But it's good to know what's out there, and because it is a very interesting and popular scheme in the Marie Curie Actions. So innovative training networks are created by the EU in order to train new generations of researchers. So basically to not just have the standard researcher that used to graduate with a PhD in the past, but really researchers that have more skills than just doing research. They are creative, independent researchers, they have entrepreneurial minds, they have innovative ideas, and they really have different skills than just the average researcher would have. And by funding these type of training networks, they want to raise the standard of doctoral training in the EU. So the EU will fund networks of host institutions who will together create a joint training program for doctoral students. So basically there are international collaborating PhD programs. And very important aspects of these programs are aspects that are that we already saw with many other of the Marie Curie actions. They are always an international component. They are focusing on interdisciplinary research. And also the intersectoral component is very important. So the collaboration between academia and non-academia. They really want to focus on the employability of the doctoral students that graduate from these programs. So these students that graduate within an ITN should be very interesting for the labor market, not just for academia, but also outside academia. And they should have a lot of opportunities to pursue their career as a scientist in different fields. And they also really want, because there are combined doctoral networks, they want to have the host institutions learn from each other and really share best practices when it comes to doctoral training. The features of an ITN are that they're always an international network, and all these partners that are in this network are recruiting and hosting early stage researchers. ESRs is the abbreviation for that. And the ESRs are people who do not have a PhD yet. So the same as with the co-fund programs, the ITN programs will also have specific vacancies to fill for doctoral students. And so people can apply for a position within an ITN network. These vacancies are also found on the EUREXIS portal. So if you know people who are interested in pursuing a doctoral degree and would like to do something international, intersectoral, and get a lot of opportunities besides just doing research, you can always tell them about these networks as well. They are bottom up as well, so any research field can apply. So any research topic can also be picked in order to create an ITN. And exposure to the non-academic sector is also very important in these networks. So all doctoral candidates within these programs will have some exposure to the non-academic sector. So they can either spend some time on a secondment in maybe the industry, but also they could work in an NGO, at a governmental organization, well, any type of non-academic sector organization can be involved in these networks. And they also very much focus on transferable skills development. So not just the typical learning about new methodologies or new theory, but also to learn about interpersonal skills, communication skills, grant writing skills, all types of other skills that you might need if you want to work either in academia or outside academia. As I already said, the people that are in these networks are early stage researchers with less than 4 years experience. And so they cannot have their PhD yet. And they also have to comply with the same mobility rule as in all the other Marie Curie actions. So they cannot have lived in the same country as where they want to apply in for more than 12 months in the past 3 years. ITN's projects, they last 4 years, but the funding you will get per PhD candidate is 3 to 36 months, and most people, of course, pick 36 months for the project. Important thing to note is that in the Netherlands, most, well, in general, a PhD program will last 48 months. So in that case, the university will have to fund the last 12 months of the PhD themselves. But in the Netherlands, most universities have some ways to do that. And they will find a way to fund the last year as well. And then also the fellows can also go on secondments during their stay, and that can be up to 30% of their recruitment periods. There's different types of networks. The most standard one and most chosen option within the ITN options is the European training networks. So these are basically, well, what I've just been talking about, international networks of academic and non-academic organizations who together train a group of researchers. It's not mandatory to deliver a doctoral degree at the end of the program, but we see that most of these networks will give their students a doctoral degree at the end. And it is probably recommendable to make it really a doctoral degree enrollment for for the fellows that are in the network. The second option is the European joint doctorates. And these joint doctorates are to really stimulate the delivering of joint degrees in Europe. At the moment, it's not so easy yet to, if you have a program that covers multiple universities in multiple countries, to get one degree that is joint from these both academic institutions. Of course, this is something that is quite complicated, but the EU really likes to stimulate more of these joint doctoral programs as well, so that's why they are giving some extra funding for it. And so if you go for this type of network, it has a higher success rate as well, because there's a specific budget for it. If it's not possible to give out a joint doctorate for these fellows, you can also still go for a multiple degree, so the people will get a degree from both of the organizations where they were recruited, or maybe if it were three, it can be 3 different degrees. But in this time, the fellows are really spending a lot of time in at least 2 academic organizations. Then there are the European industrial doctorates, and in these type of ITNs, the collaboration with industry is even stronger than in the normal ETNs. And all the doctoral candidates that are in these programs have to spend at least 50% of their time outside of the academic sector. So this is really to promote people to spend some time out, or to pursue their career outside academia as well, and to really give them a lot of career opportunities in the non-academic sector after they receive their doctorate. It doesn't work. I don't know what happened. Yeah. Of course, there are a lot of different rules for all the 3 versions, as we know from the other Marie Curie actions. For the European training networks, you need to work with at least 3 different institutions from 3 different member states or associated countries. For the joint doctorates, it's the same. And for the European industrial doctorate, you need to work with at least 2 different member states and 2 different organizations. So within the industrial doctorates, there's also the option to go for a very small program where you just have 2 institutions, or one academic institution with a non-academic institution in 2 different countries, and they are just having a very small program with only a limited amount of candidates. That's an option within the third option of the ITNs. The first one is the European Training Network. As I said, this is the standard mode, but so most of the host organizations that are involved in these networks will recruit probably 1 or 2 fellows for each of the that are working at their institution, and will then also spend some time in the other organizations. All the fellows will together have a training program. So a lot of the training courses that they will receive all together. So they have different weeks when they would go for a training in a specific country. They all come together. They do a couple of modules. They all have some training program in their own organization where they learn some specific skills related to their own research program, project. Every fellow has their own research project that they're working on. These research projects are quite specific already. So if you are a candidate applying for a job, it's not like with the co-fund where you have to write your own project proposal. But in the ITNs, there are usually very defined PhD projects already that somebody can apply for and work on. So there's in the ITNs, there's always beneficiaries and partner organizations. The beneficiaries are the organizations that actually recruit a fellow to work with their institution for the duration of the program, so the maximum of 36 months. But then there's also partner organizations, and partner organizations are organizations that do not recruit some researchers, but they can host researchers during their secondment, or they can be part of the training by delivering courses, they can be part of the dissemination and communication activities. So for example, if you would have an ITN on a very medical topic, you can imagine that there's an academic hospital that is one of the beneficiaries, maybe some kind of medtech company that is also a beneficiary that's recruiting somebody, maybe another university in another country. But then as a partner organization, maybe you would have a patient organization, like they are not going to recruit a researcher to actually work with them for the whole duration of the project, but they can maybe be involved by giving the fellows some training on how to deal with patient groups, and maybe they can be part in the dissemination of the results by just by spreading the information that was generated in the project through the patients that they are in contact with. So the partners have a bit of a different role in the project than the beneficiaries. The typical size of the networks are between 6 to 10 beneficiaries, so not so much the partners, but the people who are actually recruiting fellows. And in general, most projects tend to recruit around 10 to 15 fellows, I would say, so 10 to 15 researchers. You always need to have some non-academic sector involvement. It's not something that is official according to the rules, but it's a very popular funding scheme, and if you don't have non-academic sector involvement, the chances of being funded are basically zero, because there are so many other projects that have a very strong involvement of the non-academic sector that they just have so much higher score than you will have. So it's really essential, basically. I already said that you can get a maximum funding of 15 PhDs for a duration of 3 years. And the average contribution is about 2.5 million euros. So this is a schematic overview of the ETNs. So, for example, in this organization, maybe I can take the same example that I had before. So you will have an academic university, and maybe you will have the academic university hospital that's in the, and maybe the non-academic medtech company that's in this the consortium, and the partner organization can be the patient organization, and they can all send researchers from one place to another, and they can all be involved in the training, but all the researchers are recruited at one of the beneficiaries, and that will remain the main employer for them for the duration of the project. I will not go into too much detail on the other topics because we don't have that much time for it at the moment. But the industrial doctorate, the biggest difference is that you can also have quite a small project, and that all the fellows must spend at least 50% of their time in the non-academic sector. And in the other project, this is not something mandatory. It can be very common that they spend the biggest part of their project in the academic sector and just do a short secondment to the non-academic sector. That's perfectly normal in the other version. The joint doctorates, the big difference is that you have the PhD from different, you're enrolled for a PhD program in different organizations. So you not just have the one beneficiary that's recruiting you that will give you a PhD certificate, but there's also another organization involved that will also deliver your PhD certificate. So the funding model is like this. This is basically similar to the IF. There is the living allowance for the researchers, and then there's money for the institution to pay the management of the project and also to pay for all the training courses and the other costs that are involved with the research. Also here there's the country coefficient for each country. And again, it's a gross amount. So in the Netherlands, this salary in the end comes down to a pretty similar salary as a standard PhD student in the Netherlands. Oh yeah, and I wanted to the last slide I have is just a quick thing on the transition to Horizon Europe. Because I'm talking, that's also why I skipped a bit of the rules from the ITN, because there's no ITN call left in Horizon 2020. The last one closed in January this year. So the next ITN call will be part of the Horizon Europe program. And they're talking a lot about simplification and making the program a bit easier without all the different options and different rules. So I thought, why tell you all the rules if maybe they won't exist anymore next year? But all the actions that existed in Marie Curie in Horizon 2020 will also exist in Horizon Europe. They will get a bit different names. So the ITNs will be called MSCA doctorates in Horizon Europe. So just to make it a bit more clear, but Innovative Training Network doesn't really say that it's for PhDs, but MSCA doctorates makes it a bit more clear who is the target group. Then the IF will be called MSCA postdocs instead of individual fellowships, just so everybody, it's pretty clear that it's for people who have their PhD. And with this, you can also see that it's quite likely that it won't be for people very senior in their career, because they won't be postdocs anymore. Then RISE will probably be called staff exchanges, which is also a bit more logical than RISE, which doesn't really say something. Co-fund will probably remain co-fund, and the Marie Curie Knights will probably be called MSCA and Citizens, because it's really focused on connecting researchers and the society. I already spoke about probably the scientific age restrictions that there are going to do for the IFs. But for the ITNs, what they would like to do is to do some resubmission restrictions, because it's a very popular program and the success rates are quite low. So a bit of an artificial way to raise it is to just restrict the resubmissions, because now people can just reapply each year, and many consortia do. They do a little bit of changes and they just resubmit again. And that way, there's just so many resubmissions in the program that it's really oversubscribed. They also are maybe going to reduce the amount of money you can get per program, which means that the networks will be a bit smaller. They will probably only be for like maximum of 10 fellows instead of 15, something like that. These are all, of course, under construction still. We're not sure if all these rules will actually happen, but these are the ideas that the Commission is talking about at the moment. Another thing for Marie Curie is that now, if you have 4 years research experience, you can also apply for an IF. They're thinking about also making a PhD certificate really requirement. So just 4 years research experience won't be enough then. It's really for people who have their PhD and then probably up to a certain age range. And they're also thinking about resubmission restrictions for the IF. So if you score very low, you won't be able to reapply the next year. Are there any questions on Marie Curie, or in general? Because this is the last Marie Curie bit for today. Huh? Then I would like to give the floor to Esther. Oh, and by the way, if you have any questions, please send us an email or call us. You can find our contact details here. And then you.
Yes, thank you, Mariëlle. Okay, so I was asked to tell you a bit about ERC grants. I've prepared several slides just to tell you about all the things you need to know, at least if you are interested in applying for a grant. But please interrupt me with questions, because there's so much to talk about if you talk about ERC. So I don't know what you are looking for type of information. So just ask and I will try to answer them, okay? ERC grants, as Mariëlle already said, we are currently at the end actually of the Horizon 2020 program, and ERC is also part of this program. It was actually the big success, one of the big successes of the Horizon 2020 program. You can see it also took up a very big part of the total budget. Almost 20% of the total budget of the whole Horizon program went to ERC. But you can also see from the slide, as Mariëlle already said, it's ending. And actually that means that I think almost all ERC calls that might be relevant for you are actually already closed, the ones that are coming from the Horizon 2020 program. But of course, because it was such a successful story, they decided to continue with it in Horizon Europe, so don't worry. The only thing is that the 2020 calendar year will probably be like a gap year for ERC. The only call that's still open from the Horizon 2020 program is the advanced grant call. I'll show that in a minute, but very shortly, because I don't think this is really targeted to you. So that means that this is more of a gap year, and we expect that the first more relevant calls for you from ERC will probably be opened in spring 2021. So that will be a full year from now. We still don't know the exact details. As Mariëlle already said, it's still on the constructions. The exact things are not known now, but what we do know is that all the main features of these grants will be kept the same. So I'll just tell them how it is at this point in time, and most likely it will remain like that. Okay? So ERC grants in a nutshell. Basically, an ERC grant is what ERC calls a frontier science project. I'll go into depth a bit more on that in a few slides, but basically they want you to perform high risk, high gain, groundbreaking type of research. It's a grant that is really centered around you as a PI, so they really want you to be the driving force behind all the things you're doing in this grant. So it's really like a personal grant. And the main objectives of the two the starting and the consolidated grant, which is mostly targeted to your career stages, is if you really want to create your own first independent research group, start that up. So that's the starting grant. And if you already have a small team working with you as a PI, but you want to consolidate it or expand it, this is what the consolidator is for. So that's basically the two most interesting grants for you. And the other thing that you need to know is that you have to execute the research at a host organization in Europe. That's basically the biggest rule. And as I said, they are targeted towards different career stages. So you have the starting grant, which is meant for people who are between 2 and 7 years after their PhD. So that's really, as I said, the transition to independence, really start up your own first research team. And you have the consolidator grant, which is meant for people who are between 7 and 12 years after their PhD to consolidate their independence or to expand their own research group. And as I just mentioned very shortly, there's also an advanced grant. There's a call for advanced grant open this year, and this is really meant for internationally recognized research leaders, so the people that already have lots of things going on and are internationally, worldwide leaders in their research field. So basically this is targeting towards different career stages, so which the advanced grant is the highest one. So as I said, they're targeted towards different career stages, and they are quite strict with these eligibility windows. It's basically at the day. So if you want to apply for a starting grant, it has to be between 7 and 12 years after your PhD, and they will use the 1st of January of the call year as a reference day to calculate your eligibility. So make it a more bit concrete. If you are thinking to apply for the next starting grant, which is the 2021 call, it means that you will have to use the date of the 1st of January 2021 to see if you fall within that window. Right? So at the 1st of January 2021, you can't have received your PhD more than 7 years to the day in order to be eligible for a starting grant. If it was longer, you have to go for the consolidator. So that's how they calculate eligibility. The good thing about this, they will continue doing that to use the 1st of January of the call year as a reference date, is that you can plan ahead. You know exactly for which calls you will still be eligible, even though you don't know when the deadlines will be. There are some exceptions to these rules. You can get a certain extension in certain cases. For a mother, for every child that was born, you get an automatic extension of 18 months. And for the fathers, you can get an extension for the actual time you took off to take care of your children. Even part-time work due to parental care is also accepted. So that's good to know for the fathers. And other reasons to ask for an extension is when you've been ill for longer time, more than 3 months, or you had to take care of a sick relative, you can ask for an extension, clinical qualification, or when you had to do some national service. All these things can qualify for extension to these eligibility windows. Okay, so what does the grant look like? What type of money do you actually get if you receive an ERC grant? For a starting grant, it's up to 1.5 million euros, and for consolidated, it's up to 2 million euros. And this can be even more in specific cases. You can ask for a 1 million on top of these amounts in case you are moving to Europe, from outside of Europe. Maybe not so relevant for you. But if you have to purchase major equipment, this can be used. The 1 million top up when you need access to large facilities can also be used. And recently there was another category added when you have huge experimental costs or you have to go for field work. These type of costs can also be declared or used, used to ask for the 1 million more. Grants run up to 5 years, and you have to spend at least 50% of your time when you go for a starting grant, and 40% of your time for a consolidated grant to the project. So this is a real strict rule for ERC. ERC doesn't terminate grants or anything, only in cases when you don't keep to this time commitment. That's the only reason why ERC sometimes says, okay, we don't agree with the way the things are going, we're going to stop the project. And another important thing for you to know is that the grant is portable. So if for certain reasons you decide you want to leave your current host institute and go somewhere else, you can do that. You can take the grant with you. It's not an easy thing, so don't take it too lightly, but it is possible. So if another institute, your possibilities or your career possibilities are better, you can just go. Questions on that? Okay. So this sounds almost too good to be true, right? 1.5 million euros, maybe 2 million. The freedom to do whatever you want. It is. It's really like a really good scheme. But of course, in order to get this type of money, there's some tough requirements. So I'm going to tell you a bit about what ERC expects from your profile in the project in order to have a chance to get this amount of money. So one of the first things they are looking for is at your profile. And they really want you to show, because as I said, you can get 1.5 million euros to run a 5-year project, to do very exciting research. So they want some indication that you will be able to pull that off, that you can do some exciting research by yourself. One of the things they look at, of course, is your track record. So you need to show that you have a very promising track record of early achievements, which means for ERC that as a main author, and this can be first or last, depending on your career stage or on your research field, you have publications that are in the major international peer-reviewed journals or the field-specific journals or conference proceedings or research monograph, whatever output canals are suitable or common practice in your field. So you need these significant publications, meaning with impact in your scientific field. Things that made a difference added to your scientific discipline. And very importantly, not only are they looking for indications that you can do this type of research, they are looking for indications that you can do that by yourself, independently from other people, preferably independently from your PhD supervisor. Because in the end, they want you to run like a 1.5 million project to establish yourself as a research leader of the future. So they don't want you to be too dependent on collaborators. They really want you to show that you can come up with nice, exciting ideas or do exciting research by yourself. So that's why the panel really looks at indications that you can have this independence, and they do that by looking whether you had important publications without your PhD supervisor. And for a starting grant, you need to have at least one significant publication with impact without your PhD supervisor. For a consolidator, more. And I think in general, the more the better. And if you don't have this is really a reason not to apply, because this is an unwritten rule. It's not like a formal eligibility criterion, but if you can't show this, this is a reason to wait and work on that on your profile to have these type of applications out before you apply for an ERC grant. Yeah.
This is with your PhD supervisor, not with your postdoc supervisor, indeed, or it's...
Yeah, you are right. The documents mention PhD supervisor, but of course, the further you get along in your career, also publishing without your PhD postdoc supervisor becomes more important, especially if you are towards the end of the consolidator window. You need to show that you are the corresponding or the senior author, not depending on former supervisors. Yeah.
Okay, but it means that he cannot be as a co-author listed in the publication, or that he cannot be the last author?
It means that preferably you have an important publication with lots of citations or impact without the postdoc supervisor, at least one. And of course, you can show you can show more than one publication in your track record. So you need to show that you have this. Of course, in other papers, he or she can be there, but you need to show at least some proof that you can do it by yourself. Yeah. So this is really an important thing: the independence of the applicant. And on top of that, fortunately, it's not only just publications. They also look at other things. They look at invited presentations. If you were invited to speak at an international conference, this is some also benchmark of excellence. When you have been, given awards, grants, of course, research grants, patents, anything that shows that you can do this type of research and that you are really recognized as an important researcher. So the main issues that the panel mostly looked at is whether you had impact in your field, scientific impact in your field, the independence, as I just mentioned, but also they want you to set up a team, and they give you 1.5 million euros for it. So they also want to trust you with this amount of money, and that you can steer a team, right? So supervision skills, having supervised PhD students, maybe postdocs, is also something they're really looking at. So also have a critical look whether your CV is on par on that respect. And the last thing is international recognition they also look at. So if you're not known internationally, your chances of getting the ERC grant are quite low. Yeah, so this is one of the things is actually quite a long list of things that you need to show in order to have a chance of getting an ERC grant. That's the profile. But then, of course, there's also the project. And I was just mentioning it briefly before. ERC wants to fund what they call frontier science. And this is a slide that ERC always uses when they go about the world and present their own program, when they are asked to explain what they mean with frontier science. And basically that's it. So anything is possible. And they say, well, frontier science could be interdisciplinary research, so crossing boundaries between different fields, new and emerging research fields, where you do some pioneering work, all these type of things. When you have unconventional, innovative approaches. But the thing that really characterizes ERC, the type of research that ERC wants to fund, is high risk, high gain. So they really, I think in contrast to most of the national funding agency, ERC is willing to take a gamble with their money. It's absolutely fine. After 5 years, I was just in a talk this morning from someone from the ERC, so the executive agency, saying, well, if a project fails, actually that's a positive thing for us. Because they say it means that the level of ambition was exactly what we were looking for. So it's fine if it doesn't work out. So the risk can be substantial as long as you can have a convincing case that if it works, the gains are, that high that it justifies the risk. So it's the balance. You can be risky as long as you have a convincing case that the results that might come out are really worthwhile pursuing. Because in the end, ERC is all about opening up new horizons of knowledge. They really want science to, push towards future and to break some frontiers. So they're really looking for breakthroughs. And you can't do that without taking some risks, right? So they're fine with it. And maybe to put it a bit in more concrete, every week, like 10, 20 papers come out in Nature Cell or Science, referring to ERC as their funding source. That doesn't mean you need to publish in Nature, Cell or Science to get an ERC grant, but it just shows the level of ambition that you need. You need to come up with a project that in principle has a potential to get to results that are publishable in the highest possible output canals. That's what they want from you. That's the level of ambition they're looking for. And maybe that's another way of putting it. We once heard a panel member say that we are looking to fund excellent scientists with a vision and brilliant plans to achieve that vision, rather than individual research projects. And basically this says a lot. Actually, that was also confirmed this morning when we heard someone from the executive agency speak. They say, if you want to go for the ERC grant, you have to ask yourself, where do I want to be in 10 years' time? And where do I think my field is going to be in 10 years' time? And I have to write some kind of program, the first 5 years of the steps taking towards that endpoint. So it's not so much just a project, it's really like a longer-term plan that you have to send in. You can call that a vision or a dream with a deadline. I don't know what you prefer, but at least it's not just another project. They want you to come up with your ideas, with the longer-term ideas about the things you want to do in your research field. And if you have some brilliant plans to get there, this is the recipe to get for an ERC grant. Because in the end, they want to fund you because they believe that you can be a future research leader. You want to establish your own niche and make a difference in your research field. So basically, that's what you have to convey when you start writing your application. So that takes time. Don't underestimate the time it takes to have this type of idea. It goes a bit further than the usual project that you may be used to writing. Actually, many laureates that we speak tell us that actually the thinking process took the longest. So in that sense, it's a good thing that it's almost a year now before the next calls will be. So you have plenty of time to think about it. So once you've done all this thinking, then of course you have to write. And I'm going to tell you a bit about what the application looks like and how the evaluation procedure works, because it has some implications on the way you write your proposal. Unless there are questions, of course, on this first part. Okay. All right, so talking about submission and evaluation. So that's the first thing you have to remember. At the deadline, you as an applicant are obliged to send in everything. There's no two-step procedure for you. You have to write everything and make sure that you're ready at the deadline. However, once you send it in, ERC uses a two-step evaluation. So you actually have to, apart from the online administrative forms, you have to write 2 documents, a B1 and a B2. Both of them have to be sent in at a deadline. However, ERC takes a two-step process to evaluate them. So in the first evaluation step, only your B1 will be read by the panel. I'll show you in a minute exactly how it works. But the B1 is a short version of your proposal where you present yourself. So you present your CV and your track record. So everything that shows that you have all these things that I just mentioned. And a 5-page synopsis of your proposal. So 5 pages to present your idea and to convince this panel, the evaluation panel, that this is really exciting and they should, at least give it a chance to be read by experts. And there's a second part, there's the B2, which is actually 15 pages full proposal. These are the things that you have to write and send in at the deadline. And depending on the scores that you get, basically similar to what they are planning to do with Marie Curie, there are resubmission rules. I'll show them in a minute. But first I'll tell you how the evaluation procedure works. Yeah. So as I said, B1, that 5-page synopsis and your track record, CV and track record, is read by the panel only. Importantly, and important to know is that at this step, first step, the panel does not have access to B2. So they only have access to B1. So that's everything, that's the only stuff they have to work with. And the panel consists of 10 to 15 people with quite a broad background. So I'll show you in a minute the diversity that you can find in these panels. And these are the people that decide whether you go through to the second step. And as you can see, 25 to 30% of the proposals fail already, make it to the second round. So like 75% of the proposals fail in the first round. So actually 75% of the proposals, those 15 pages full, those 15 pages were written for no reason. They were not even looked at because they failed already in the first step. So your B1 is really, really, really important. This is where the biggest cut is made, talking about selection procedure. So once you get to the second step, both your B1 and B2 will be read by the panel, so the same people that decided on the fate in the first step already, but it will also be sent out to external referees. And these are your real peers, so the experts in your field will have a look at it. They're asked to give their opinion remotely, and they will send in their evaluation reports. And also, if you make it to the second step, automatically you will get to the interview. So there's no additional selection in the second round. Once you get to the second round, your full proposal will be sent out to the experts, and you will go to the interview in Brussels. And they will conduct an interview with you based on the comments that they received from the external experts. And then your success rate is about 40 to 50%. So once you get there, chances are quite good that you make it. So another reason why your B1 is so important, and also if you see this, you will probably realize that you have to write these two documents for two different audiences. The panel is a panel with 10 to 15 people with a very broad background, so like a generalist panel. And the B2 is really sent out to the experts. So the way you write it, the level of, let's say, detail and the jargon that you use is completely different between B1 and B2. So it's really something you have to realize. So you have to really look at them as two standalone documents written for different audiences. And after the interview, in the end, the panel makes the final decision. So picking the right evaluation panel, picking the right 10 to 15 people to decide over your proposal is really, really important. These are the ones that have to get excited about the idea in B1, and these are the ones that somehow have to like you enough if you go to Brussels to grant you the money. So it's really important to get familiar with the panel, what type of expertise is present there, and which people do you think will appreciate your idea and your plans best, and also your CV. So it's really important to do some kind of homework before you even apply. Because it makes a lot of difference. These are some examples of the different evaluation panels. As you can see, there's the ISH4, the social science and humanities. It says the human mind and its complexity, and you can see that the expertise from the panel members ranges from cognitive science to linguistics to philosophy of mind. So it's really very broad. And the same goes through for the other panels. So you will see for almost every panel it's quite a broad range. So it's crucial that these people with this type of background get excited about your idea. So you also have to realize that when you write your B1, have that audience in mind and make sure that how you write things down, that you get the let's say, intelligent layperson excited. That's basically your job. And it makes it's really, really important, because sometimes we see that people pick the wrong panel, in hindsight, pick the wrong panel, and then it's just impossible for them to appreciate what you've written down completely or sufficiently, and they'll grade you maybe lower than you deserved. And that can have some severe consequences, because there are resubmission rules, actually restrictions to resubmission. So when you made it to the interview, so when you made it to the second round, there's no restriction, so you can reapply again next year. However, if you were rejected in the first step, so based on your B1, there are some severe things that can happen if you scored a B. It means you can't submit next year. But if you scored a C, which is the lowest grade that you can get, you'll have to wait for 2 calls, actually 2 calls in between. So if you would score a C in the 21 call, the next one, you will have to wait till 24 call again in order to be able to apply again. So it's really important that you have a critical assessment. 1, is this the right panel? 2, is this the right time for me? Can I show already all these things that were mentioned in the slides before? And is my idea mature enough? If you don't feel satisfied with it, or you know, somehow you can't get concrete enough, yeah? Mm-hmm. Maybe, and I'm not sure if I understood you correctly. Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So there's 5 calls, 6 calls. Let's say. Yeah. 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 I can show you one. There's no limit to the number of times you are allowed to apply. So in principle, every year you get to the interview and don't get it, you can reapply again. So there's no reason for picking a certain year. Well, of course, I hope you don't score C's all along again. But yeah, it's like if you apply in the first year of the program, then you have to wait. You can't submit the 2nd and the 3rd, so it's the 4th round, and then it's the 5th and the 6th out, and then it's the 7th. Yeah, that could be. I hope that's not the way it goes, but that's a possibility. And I think it also has to do with what's the right time to apply within your career stage, maybe. I have some slides at the end, I can show them, but I can just tell you that actually it doesn't really matter at what year after PhD you are looking at your chances of getting the grant. 2 or 3 years after PhD is quite difficult. We see that these have significant lower success rates because you simply don't have enough time to come up with all these, benchmarks of excellence to tick all those boxes. But starting from 4 years after PhD, success rates are really similar over your career stage, so over years after PhD, even talking about transition between starting and consolidator. So you might think waiting till the end of the starting grant window is the best way to go, because then you have most output and you're just before the consolidator, so that's the best time to apply. Most people think that, and you see that most applications are actually at that point in time. But success rates are similar compared to 5 years after PhD, but also 7 years after PhD or 8 years after PhD, so at the beginning of the consolidator window. So it's really like a flat transition. So I think the message here is that just apply when you think you have the momentum, when you think the time is right, and you have all these things, and it doesn't really matter how many years after PhD you are. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so you have to, so that actually has to do with this. Really think about when is the right time to apply for ERC. And yeah, so that takes us, there's some things that you need to take into account. As I just said, many of the laureates say that developing the idea, what you exactly want to do, takes a lot of time. It takes time to think of it yourself. It takes time to talk to your colleagues, to ask for feedback, and do you think this is exciting enough? Do you think this is possible? So really take some time to develop that. Also be critical at your own profile. Of course, don't be too modest. That would be a pity. But you need to show, the things that I just show. If you can't show any paper without a PhD supervisor, or just one which is not in a very high impact journal, it might be better to invest some time to improve your track record in order to get there. Otherwise, if you send it in, you run the risk of having to wait at least 3 years. Let's say 2 calls is 3 years. And it's the same, I mean, it doesn't really help you a lot. Apart from the fact that you know how it works and you get some feedback, but well. Some homework to do. Look at the panels, as I just said. You know what the type of background is that are there, but you can also see who were in the panel, so you can know which people might be evaluating your proposal, can also help deciding for which panel to go or maybe how to write. Well, make sure that you ask for feedback when you are applying, when you are writing. So the ERC website, in contrast to most of the EU websites, this one is quite accessible. So you can find here all the information on calls that are upcoming or currently open. You can see the panel composition, and it's maybe good to know that there's ERC uses a system where they have like 2 groups of panel members. Let's say group A and group B, and they alternate these groups. So for, let's say, the panel LS1, they have a group A and a group B, and in 2021 it's A, and then in 22 it's B, and then it's A again, so it alternates. And ERC only publishes the composition of the panel on their website after the call, the whole procedure was closed. But it means that if you look up the panel composition of 2 calls back, you'll have quite a good idea of who might be in the panel, so you can help you picking the right panel or see what type of people might be reading it. Another thing that's also really good to do is to have a look at their project database, where you can see all the projects that were funded per panel, per funding scheme. So, and you can even use some keywords, so you can see who was awarded in your research topic or research field. So you can see who they are, so you know the profile of your potential competitors, but you can also see what type of research ERC is willing to fund. So it's really a very good source of information for you to get familiar with before you go writing. Okay. And finally, the same slide as Mariëlle showed. There's lots of... yeah. Well, there's many people at your universities that can help you with all these applications. We can do that as well. So you can use these contact details. So, questions? Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. I am wondering how important are pilot data? Because if you mentioned that it should be high risk, high gain, so it is worth it to include some pilot data, and if so, in the big one proposal or in the big one part that we're writing, it's also important to include that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The thing is, of course, if you propose something risky with potentially high gains, of course the panel still has to believe that you can pull it off. It's all about credibility in the end. So it's a combination between your profile and what you're proposing. And if you're proposing something really risky, it really helps if you can show some preliminary data showing that the initial steps can be done, and it can be done by you. That's another reason of putting preliminary data in it. So if you're going for something very well exciting and risky stuff, I would definitely recommend putting some pilot data there. Not too much, because then they might think, oh, no, this is not novel enough, because it's already done. But yeah, it's usually good to have that. And I would put it both in B1 and B2. Because B1 is, apart from the, the novelness of the novelty of the idea, it's also about the feasibility of the idea. So you have to convince the panel that the feasibility of what you're planning to do is, of a high enough level. So in that respect, I would also advise to put preliminary data in B1 as well. Yeah.
Another question is like, if you are changing a little bit your research field, because I mean, you did a PhD in something else and then you are moving forward to another things, that maybe you don't have too much publications on that. How to deal that? Because this is a starting grant, so it's supposed that you are starting a new idea or a new research line, but I don't see the balance there.
Yeah, it's again a very delicate thing. Actually, it was one of the things that was talked about already also in the morning from someone from the ERC saying that these are the situations that panels take sometimes like 30 minutes to discuss whether they think it's good enough or not. So this is it's not like there's one recipe and if you do it like that, it's going to work. But the general feeling is that, yes, it is really important that you can show expertise and skills also in that new field in order to have the panel give them some confidence that you can do this. So yeah, I would say you need a strong profile in both of these disciplines then, if you want to switch fields. Yeah. Yeah. So I agree with you that it's a bit of a contradiction, but yeah, this reality is that they think it's important. Yeah. Other questions?